welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see so many of you here in this packed lecture theatre. And my name's Lindsay Turnbull. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Biology Teaching, and that means it's my job to look after the course. I was also one of its creators. We've got a new course, which I can tell you we only started in the last few years. And I provide some of the academic oversight to make sure that the course is the way it should be, and we're teaching the right things in the right places. But obviously there's a huge team of people who deliver this course. All right, so this is my opening gambit, that why you should come and study biology, because biology is the science of the 21st century. I don't think anybody would really dispute that, in the same way as they probably wouldn't dispute that physics was the science of the 20th century. And why? Because we've got so many challenges that we're facing at the moment as a society, as a species. If you think about antibiotic resistance, which is an ever-growing problem, the pandemic that we've all lived through and are still living through, climate change, and coupled with climate change, obviously the massive loss of biodiversity and the way those things interact to create an enormous challenge for us, for humanity going forward. And all of these things are biological in nature. And by studying on our course, all of these things and more are elements of our course, and you can become equipped then with the fundamental science that underpins a lot of those things, but also the skills that you need to go out and engage with a lot of these problems and then make a real difference in the world. So that's what we hope for our students. Now, is that an idle boast? Well, I don't think so, because I think in our Department of Biology, we have an amazing array of researchers doing amazing research. And I just have picked 3 examples here, not because I've looked through for the most exciting things that we're doing right now, but these are just 3 stories that appeared in our news feed over the last 1 or 2 weeks. I just went to our website and had a look. So the first one here, this is the European badger, and it's just had its genome fully sequenced. And that's a really important step, to have a whole genome. A reference genome is a really important step when you're trying to study any organism. And Oxford is heavily involved in something called the Darwin Tree of Life project. And that's a commitment involving the Wellcome Trust to try to get a reference genome for every species in Britain. So that's a huge, ambitious project, and Oxford is at the heart of that. And our scientists working at Wytham Woods, which is a resource that the university has, are providing many of the samples that are going into that project. And the Badger project in Wytham has been running for decades. So at Wytham, there are some of the longest running ecological studies anywhere in the world. The second image is the large blue butterfly. The large blue butterfly went extinct in Britain, and it has been reintroduced successfully due to the efforts of several people, but one of the crucial people is Jeremy Thomas, who is retired now, but was a very active member of our department, and still is actually, despite the fact that he's retired. He still engages with staff and students, and he's based in New College, and Ashley, who you're going to hear from in a minute, took her students out to one of the sites in Gloucestershire where the large blue has been re-established, so that her students could meet with Jeremy and learn more about that project. And that's sort of the way that another great advantage of Oxford is this tutorial system and having an engaged tutor who will add to your experience. The third example, this is barley. Barley is a cereal crop, one of the major crops that we depend on. It's obviously crucial for beer, but it's also used in bread. And cereal crops are very environmentally unfriendly in a way. They rely on very heavy inputs. So you have to give them a lot of nitrogen fertiliser, and that normally comes from something called the Haber-Bosch process, which is very energy-intensive process. They have a huge carbon footprint, and the nitrogen fertiliser that goes onto the fields, most of it runs off and ends up in the rivers and causes all kinds of problems there. So what do we do about that, given that we need cereal crops? Well, one thing is to try to learn from other organisms. That's why it's important to study all kinds of organisms. There are other plants out there who don't need nitrogen fertiliser because they have established relationships with things called nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And those are plants like peas and beans and lentils. And if we want barley to do that, then we're going to have to get in and re-engineer barley so that it can also signal and make contact with those bacteria in the soil and benefit from that natural biological nitrogen fixation. And Phil Paul, somebody in our department, is heavily involved in that project, and they've just released, an exciting new breakthrough in getting barley to actually start signalling to those nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil. So those are just 3 examples of great things, and there are hundreds of them. Every week, scientists across Oxford and in our department are moving forward with exciting research. Okay, so what's that got to do with you? Well, because we want you to be part of that. And that's what our MBIOL programme is all about. So it is a 4-year programme. The 4th year is optional and depends to some extent on performance. So we require our undergraduates to get at least a 2-1 in their first 3 years. And I just want to say that the vast majority of our students do that. So it's not a very high hurdle. So this 4th year is optional. This new programme was introduced in 2019. Prior to that, we only had a 3-year programme. And our first cohort is just starting year 4. So they will be starting their 4th year in October. And we predicted, or we sort of estimated, that around 2/3 of our cohort would probably want to do that optional 4th year. But in fact, 90% of them are choosing to stay on to that 4th year. So I think that's a real testament to the success of this programme, and they have been writing research proposals over the last term, and they're planning to do all kinds of really exciting research embedded in these research groups. And this picture here is actually some of our second years who this year went off to Tanzania on one of our residential field courses, and this is them having a great time. All right, so what does the programme emphasise? Well, obviously, if you're going to be doing cutting-edge research in year 4, you probably don't feel very equipped to do that right now, coming out of school. So there is a big emphasis throughout our course and throughout the first 3 years on what we call research skills. So our degree is not just sitting in lecture theatres, absorbing information passively from intelligent people. You are going to get a lot of that, but we have a very strong focus on developing research skills so that when you leave here, you feel that you can actually do stuff. You don't just know stuff. And we have lots of lab practicals, for example, and we have these more intensive, more immersive experiences, many of which are field course, but some of those are also lab-based. So having an intensive lab-based experience where you can really bring your skills on. Throughout the course, there is a big emphasis on computing inevitably. Biology is a quantitative subject, right? And you need to know how to process data, how to analyse data, and also how to do different types of modelling. You're probably aware that during the COVID pandemic, Oxford modellers played a really crucial role in trying to understand how would the pandemic unfold, what would be the impact of various interventions and measures, and that modelling was incredibly important in influencing government policy. So that's a big part of our course. So what does it look like year to year? Most of this information is in the little brochure that I hope you've managed to pick up and you can take away with you. But I'm just going to walk you through what some of that means in case all of these words are not entirely familiar. I've got some photographs here that were taken on our first year residential field course. So there's a compulsory field course in first year. This year we went to Pembrokeshire, and thanks to Jake Dudgeridge, who's one of our students, he sent me some of his photographs. He was really keen on taking photographs and took thousands while we were there. So yes, that's something that everybody does, irrespective of what you think you might be interested in. First year, everything is compulsory, in fact. So there's no choice. You can't decide, actually, I'm not interested in ecology and evolution, or I'm not interested in biochemistry. Everybody gets that broad understanding, a bit of everything, so that you can make a more informed choice about how you want to specialise. A-level biology is very different from our first year course. There are many things that we consider to be foundational to biology that A-level biology doesn't even think about. And that's something to do with the way the A-level has developed. It's become extremely human-focused. Our biology is not very human-focused. there actually isn't a lot of human biology in our degree. So you will learn a lot in diversity of life about the diversity of organisms on this planet. And that will range all the way from bacteria and other unicellular organisms all the way up to birds and mammals and everything in between. Building a phenotype is about how do you construct one of those organisms? What is required from the genes and from the cells, and how are they working together to create a functioning organism? And in evolution and ecology, you're answering questions about, how did those things evolve and how do they interact with each other and with their environments? So these three strands are sort of woven together to tell a story of life on this planet, including our part in that and our interactions with it. So there is a series of lectures. There are 8 lectures every week and 2 lab practicals every week. And if you want to see our teaching labs, they're open this afternoon from 2:30, and you can see the kinds of things that go on there. In addition to that, there is the beginning of computing skills. So an introduction to a little bit of programming, a little bit of analysis, which tends to be quite closely coupled to the practicals. So taking data from the practicals and what can we do with it, what can we learn from it. And then the residential field course, which takes place in the summer, you'll be glad to know. So that's what first year looks like. In second year then, you will get, most of our students have a pretty good idea after year 1 where their interests lie. And so in second year, you have to do about 75% of what's on offer. So you've got that ability to specialise a bit. And we organise our teaching into 4 themes. So there is cell and developmental biology, there is ecology and evolution again, there is genomics and host microbe interactions, and there is organismal biology, so that's behaviour and physiology, but again, not really human, more other animals. And those, you have to do 3 of these 4 themes, and in each theme there are 2 modules. So actually, strictly speaking, you have to do 6 modules from the 8, and you can combine them any way you like. And there are no clashes here. So actually, some of our students just go to everything. They want to go to all lectures, but they just concentrate on 6 of the 8 for their revision and for their examination. But you might decide to go to everything just because you want to have that information. Alongside, so the modules contain both lectures and practicals. The practicals are different in nature, so some of the practicals are wet lab practicals, but some of them are computing practicals. So, for example, the host microbe interactions is basically a disease module, and the practicals that go with it are 4 computer practicals learning how to model the spread of a disease through a population. So that's the basis of things like the COVID models that we just discussed. And there is also compulsory stats teaching. So this is then a more formal way of really learning the basics of statistical analysis. There are lectures and practicals to support that. And then after Easter, the exams are immediately after Easter. And then after that, we do something called an extended skills course. So you get a choice of multiple options, including residential field courses, some of which are overseas. But there are also field courses that run in the UK that are not residential. So this is an example, some photographs taken from the Rob Salguero Gomez's Twitter feed, who runs this course. This is about technology in ecology. And so he takes people up to Wytham Woods and teaches them how to fly drones, how to do dendrochronology, and all kinds of how we can use technology to survey biodiversity and understand it better, because we need to sort of scale up our understanding of biodiversity and biodiversity loss. And then also in the lab, though, there are currently two lab-based intensive skills courses as well, which allow people who are more have that kind of bent to extend their skills. And from those skills training courses, you'll produce a poster, and that's one of our examined components. So if you go to a scientific conference, there's always posters, mostly from PhD students, to present their work. And this is what you'll be doing, to present some aspect of data that you collected on one of these courses and present that to the examiners. So that's second year. And then in year 3, you see that there are 8 modules, and now rather than us expecting you to do 75% of what we offer, we expect you to do about 50% of what we offer. So you've become even more specialised. And these are our 8 modules. Again, they're all timetabled in such a way that there are no clashes, so you can have any combination of these that you like. Some of them are, for example, Advanced Ecology and Evolution is just drawing from the Ecology and Evolution strand. Some of them, like Green Grand Challenges, is bringing in all kinds of ideas and concepts from all across biology, so it's rather more interdisciplinary. So you have to attend the lectures in 4 of these modules. Some of them have a small number of practicals associated with them. And there are also some other things. For example, there is a journal club. And in that, small groups of students read and critique scientific papers. So that's, again, starting to turn your attention towards actually doing research. What does a scientific paper look like? What makes a good scientific paper? When am I going to believe these people's findings and when am I not? So that's an important part of it. You give an oral presentation on any topic you like. So you can just, that again is an examine component. So you just choose any topic and you dig into that in depth and prepare an oral presentation. The computing skills continue. So again, they're slightly more specialist. Of course, the bioinformatics and things like that. And then after the exams, which again are straight after Easter, you spend the term going into a lab group and writing a research proposal. So earlier in this year, you're asked to talk to our staff. And at the moment, you can talk to anybody in the Department of Biology pretty much, but you can actually go beyond our department if you've decided that actually your interests lie more in the more medical sciences direction. You can actually go and talk to a supervisor in a related department, and you can create, or you can decide, I think I want to do, we asked you to actually think of 3 possible research projects that you'd like to do. And then we have a process of allocating students to projects. So we try to make that as fair as we possibly can. And the vast majority of our students did get one of their top 3 choice projects this year. And if they didn't, then we called them in and we worked with them to find a supervisor that they were happy with. And once they'd actually been matched to a supervisor, then they spent that final term of the year writing that research proposal. And that's the final examined component. So you can see our degree has a very broad-based assessment, quite a diverse mix of assessment. It's not all about exams, because in the real world, people don't want you to sit exams, funnily enough, but they do want you to create research proposals and create scientific posters and things like that. So that's the end of the 3 years. And that's the stage that our year 3s are at right now. And then when they come back in 4th year, what they're going to do is enact that research proposal that they have written with the support of their supervisor. And this is just a sample of, just to demonstrate just how many people we have in the department, you know, at least 100, if not more, potential supervisors. I haven't fitted them all on here. Look, I've only got to M. So I was just trying to copy paste faces off our website, spanning an enormous range of biology and some very eminent people who are quite happy to have 4th year students in their labs. Okay, so if you do that, you finish the 4th year, then you graduate with an M.Bio rather than a BA, but you could leave at the end of 3 years if you decide you don't want to do that. Actually, you want to go on and study something else, then you can leave with a BA after 3 years. Okay, so that's the departmental teaching, but that is complemented by the college. So I'm sure you're all aware that Oxford has a whole bunch of colleges associated with it, and you will be joining a college. And although all students studying biology, no matter what college they're in, will come to the department to get all of that teaching I've just described, so the vast majority of your teaching, you'll also have a tutor in a college, and they will be responsible in the 1st year for providing this very personalised tuition, which supports the departmental teaching, but also helping you to organise in years 2, 3 and 4, getting tutorial support from all across our department. So what I would say, and Ashley's going to say a lot more about college choice, is the college choice is not very important. What's very important is to decide, is our degree right for you? is this MBio course the right course for you? Because the vast majority of your teaching will come from the department, and you will not have a very different experience depending on which college you're in. So, for example, the choice of fourth year supervisor is nothing to do with what college you're in. And the vast majority of students do not end up in the research group of the tutor in their college. In fact, we rather discourage that because it creates a bit of a conflict of interest. So, don't worry about which college to choose. Okay, and then you will get a tutorial about 1 hour a week, typically. All right, so I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Ashley Griffin, who's our admissions coordinator, who'll tell you more about getting in here.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. It's really exciting for us to have you all back in Oxford for Open Days. We've had online Open Days for the last couple of years, which have been a little bit dreary, really better than nothing, but it's great to have you all back in the town. So as Lindsay said, I'm the admissions coordinator for biology, which means I'm responsible for running our admissions process at the department level. I'm also an admitting tutor at New College, but I'm talking to you today in my role as the biology admissions coordinator for the whole subject. What I'm going to try and do is there's two things I'm going to try and do. The first thing is I'm going to try and demystify our admissions process for you a little bit. As Lindsay said, in Oxford we have the sort of rather confusing, multi-layered institution of having the department and colleges on top of that. Both are involved in teaching, as Lindsay's explained, and both are involved also in admissions. So I'm just going to try and explain how those two layers of the university match up for us in our process. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the application process itself, maybe a little bit, some tips about how to go about writing your personal statement and so on. So in this slide, I've divided up the slide into two. So this is, Lindsay's already talked about how the teaching's divided into the department and college. The admissions process for biology is designed at the department level. So all the tutors come together and make decisions about how we want to run our admissions process. And we are in charge of that. The university has got certain guidelines about, basic framework that we have to follow. But we're given a lot of freedom in how we design our process that we think works for our subject. And so if you're going to, if you think you're considering another course at the university, biochemistry, for example, they've got they'll have a different process from us. So that's worth bearing in mind, just in case you thought things might be getting simpler. They're not. So we run our own admissions process. And but it's up to the individual college tutors to make decisions about who they're going to admit. So when you go for an interview, you go for an interview at a college. A college tutor will be looking at your UCAS form, and they will make a decision about whether or not you're going to get a place. But there is oversight at the department level of those decisions. Okay, so we all meet together and we look at all the applications together, and we check to make sure as much as we can that the decisions of tutors are consistent with one another. All right, and it's actually really successful. So if we look at, we've had a big process review this year that showed that it doesn't matter which college you apply to, it doesn't affect your chance of getting a place. Okay, so I think people sometimes feel if they apply to a college that offers more places, so some colleges will have 8 places, some colleges will have 4 places, the instinct is to think, well, the one with 4 places is going to be more competitive. That isn't the case. Okay, we design our process to make sure that isn't the case, and we're successful at doing that. So whichever college you apply to doesn't make any difference to your chance of getting in. The communication about, if you're communicating about arrangements for interviews and whether or not you've been successful will all be done through college. So the department process is sort of like the engine under the bonnet sort of thing, but you're sort of front-facing interactions will be with the college. We'll be sitting at the table at the end. If you have got any questions about that, feel free to ask me. But that's the basic idea. You should be aware that not every college offers biology. So you might be wandering around town this afternoon and think that Trinity looks like a really gorgeous college, which doesn't do biology. So if you want to do biology, you have to look elsewhere. These are the colleges that offer biology, and there's plenty of them. You'll find plenty of choice there. So, choice of college. Lindsay touched on this a little bit and emphasised that the most important point here really is that whatever college you choose to apply to doesn't affect the teaching that you're going to get for your biology degree very much at all. The only thing that it might change a little bit is the tutorials that you get in first year. So, if the tutors if you're particularly interested in ecology or you're particularly interested in genetics, if you apply for a college where the tutor is expert in those areas, in the first year you might get a few more tutorials in that subject. It really doesn't make much difference. When students are in their second and third years, they're very much more independent in the choice of tutors that they go to for their teaching, for their weekly tutorials. So I'll see my first years most weeks in first year, but then if they don't, I'm an evolutionary biologist, if they don't choose to do the evolutionary modules, then I really don't see them nearly as often as I do others. So depending on what your subject, how you choose to specialise through the second and third year, you might not get much direct teaching from your tutor. So it doesn't really make too much difference there. The other thing that's probably worth saying is that we, in the interest of making the process as fair as possible, we can't guarantee that you will be interviewed at the college that you choose on your UCAS form. So we have because some of the colleges are more popular than others, it makes it unfair for students and starts to introduce what we don't want, which is a different experience for or chance of students, depending on what college they apply to. So now increasingly we're redistributing students across colleges. So the upside of that is, the downside is you might not get to go to the college that you visit this afternoon and you really fell in love with. The upside is that we're making the process as fair as we can. And secondly, you will love your college wherever you end up going. All the students end up loving their college and thinking it's the best college. You only have to ask the student volunteers that are walking around in the museum today, and they'll all tell you that their college is the best college. New College is the best college. But do go around as many colleges as you can this afternoon, because it is really, it's like, it'll give you a sense of what it's like to be a student at Oxford, a very special experience that we can offer here. All right, so down to some details. So like the UCAS form, you're going to put your grades on the UCAS form, and we pay very close attention to GCSE. So when we're choosing for interview, we're really looking at the GCSE results. Those are the ones that you have already achieved. They're very good predictors of how students do on course, so we really pay attention to them. We're also checking to see if you have our minimum requirements at A-level. So if you haven't yet sat your A-levels and don't yet have those results, we want to see that you're predicted to get our minimum requirement, which is A-star AA. Biology is required and a second A-level in chemistry, physics or maths. And we've introduced that relatively recently because we find that somebody with a little bit more rounded education at school in sciences does better in the course and copes better with some of the more quantitative material that we teach at a science degree. So we're looking for like a little bit more science than just biology. That third A-level is up to you. I think even if you do history and English and a non-science subject, that can actually bring quite a lot to your ability to enjoy and get the most out of university education, where there's a much more emphasis on being able to write essays and communicate in written word. The minimum requirement for the IB is 39 points, and all of the other, not doing either of them, the university has got a fantastic website, very comprehensive, where you can see what our minimum requirements are for other qualifications. So the other thing that we see on the UCAS form, the other piece of information that we have about you as well, you can all pass exams. You're all exam passing machines if you're applying to come to us. So the thing that we're really looking at as well in the UCAS form is the personal statement. And this is perhaps one of the most common questions that we get asked. It's like, what do I put in my personal statement? My number one tip is to make it personal. Okay, so your school will be very supportive of you and maybe perhaps give you like a template that they say has been tried and tested, and it will be, you know, like they'll give you a list of books and say read some of these and put them in there, and it's, you know, creates a very safe, very formulaic, and for us not a very information rich personal statement. What we really want to know is why you want to come to, you know, I'm going to teach you for 3 years. I want to know why you want to do biology. Okay, so we really want you to tell us what's interesting you about the subject, and especially we would like to see some evidence of that outside of school. All right, so it could be just what you're reading. I'm not saying don't write about books that you've read. But something that tells us that your interest goes beyond just being good at biology exams at school. Okay. So to give you a little idea of how competitive, obviously it's competitive to get onto our course. I hope you all want to go on the course after Lindsay's brilliant description of it. It is a great course and competitive to get on. We cut about a half to 2/3 in the shortlisting stage, so even getting an interview is really an achievement. And to do that, we take into account all the information on your UCAS forms, including your referee's statement, and all shortlisted candidates get interviewed by 2 colleges. Okay, so you get more than one bite of the cherry. If you have like if you get a bit too nervous and you clam up in one interview, you get another try. Okay, so it takes a bit of the pressure off. In the interview, the idea of the interview really is designed to, in some ways, act as like a mini tutorial. So we want to sort of find students who enjoy talking about biology. So we will we'll try to present you with something that we hope will be a little unfamiliar to you, because we want to see how you react to something new. Are you curious? You know, can you ask sensible questions? You know, how do you go about trying to understand something that's new? So we're not trying, it's not like an interview where we're testing you for knowledge. You know, we know that you know a lot about biology at this point. But we just want to get a feel for how you respond in the kind of teaching environment that we give here. It's not for everybody, and the interview is like really important at sort of giving us a feel for how you respond to being confronted by something new, something interesting, and having somebody there to talk to about it. So we're looking for that kind of performance in the interview. This year the interviews will be online again because partly because of the COVID uncertainty around COVID, when we're making decisions about the format of the interview university-wide. But thereafter, it's up for debate, and there's going to be wider consultation about that, about whether we go back to interviews in person or stay online. And one of the really important people in that debate is you. Like, what would you like? And we don't really get the chance to hear a lot from you out there in schools. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to take a quick poll, if you don't mind. I'd be really interested to know what you feel about online admissions interviews versus in person. So if I can just ask you to stick your hand up if you would prefer an interview in person. Come all the way to Oxford, have your interview in person. Okay. What about online? Just stay easy peasy, stay at school, have it online? Right, yeah, the same as yesterday. Same as yesterday. Okay, that's it. Really, thanks everyone. So in the format, as I've said, the format of the interview, we'll ask you about your personal statement. We'll typically confront you with a picture, an object of you in person, and ask you to talk about, you know, how it evolved, what's adaptation, ask you to sort of like think about why it is the way it is. There's usually a component in an interview where we confront you with like a data figure. We want to see how you go about getting information from data, interpreting data. That's a really important part of the interview, which is often not done that well, something that's maybe not taught at school the way it should be. So that's something that I really recommend you practice in advance. And you might get some like big, broad questions. We want to get you talking. So we might ask you some big, broad questions about, does climate change matter, just to get us talking about the topic. So application offers are made from the shortlist. Offers are made to about 1 in 4. So it's still very competitive at that stage, and the UCAS form and the interview have equal weight. So even if your interview doesn't go super well, we do still take your UCAS form into account. Yes, I might skip this a little bit. The pool is just to say that we have this open offer system where we over offer so that we can fill missed offers, and those are people that aren't necessarily allocated to college but get put in the pool, and then we use them to fill up offers, missed offers. So I just thought it would be worth having. There's lots of course, press attention on admissions in Oxford and whether it's fair or not. We've just had a admissions process review, extremely thorough analysis of all admissions data from the last 10 years. A huge thing, hundreds of pages. So I'm going to pick out a few things just to reassure you that we're doing the best we can to make this as fair as possible. So there's no detectable effect in the biology admissions process of school type or level advantage. So if you go to an independent school, it's not an advantage, it's not a disadvantage. You go to a state school, it's not an advantage, or it's not a disadvantage. It doesn't make any difference to us. We've designed the process to make sure that's the case. Students perform equally well on course, regardless of level advantage at arrival. So some people have been given the opportunity to really shine at school, and others haven't, and have managed to, nevertheless get placed at Oxford, but they might not have, have the same level of education that others have. And in the 3 years or 4 years that we teach you, we managed to obliterate that difference. So that's testament to the hard work that the teachers do on the course. It doesn't make any difference where you went to school, what kind of advantage you might have had when you were at school. When you get here, it's a level playing field. It's also reassuring, perhaps, the data, to us especially, is to show that we're quite good at picking the best candidates. So the ones that we offer a place to do better, are more likely to meet the offer than the ones that we don't give a place to. So the process is as fair as we can possibly make it. There's a take home from that. So I think I'm just going to end there. Thanks very much. I'm going to hand over to Beth, who's going to talk to you a little bit about careers. And if you've got any questions about the admissions process, I'll be sitting over there in about 10 minutes.
Right, thanks very much. So just for 5 minutes, I'm just going to briefly touch upon what our students go on to do after they've done the MBIOL degree. Just to follow up also on what Ashley said, there is going to be a mock interview, and it starts at 11:30 in here, and I'll be one of the tutors grilling one of our current students that's on the MBIOL degree. So that's at 11:30 if you want to see a mock interview. Right, so to touch briefly upon the careers side, the take-home message is that diverse career options are available to you if you do our MBIOL degree. So I thought the best way to show that was just to kind of showcase a few examples of what our graduates have gone on to do. So firstly, our MBIOL course is a new course, so we've only recently started offering this integrated masters this 4th year. So a lot of the case studies that we have are from students that did the 3-year BA. So for the data that we have, a lot of them went on to postgraduate research in biology, which would include doing a master's and doing a PhD. So we know from previous data that this has been about half of our students have gone on to postgraduate research. We're not sure what it's going to be like with the MBIOL graduates, given that they've already done their master's. But a lot of them also use the skills and the knowledge that they've developed from their MBIOL course to establish careers in a variety of sectors. And of course, this could be related to biology, so it could have direct connections, so including but not limited to graduate medicine, working in the civil service, for example, health and social care department, going into education, media, whether that's written word or making documentaries, and conservation work as well. But also, a lot of our graduates will go on to careers that have no direct connections with biology. So again, not limited to law, finance, business, data science, policy advisors, even some artists as well. So really broad, the different things that our graduates have gone on to do. And I thought a good way to showcase this was to show what the students have said about how they've used their biology degree in their different careers. So this is Harriet, who's a PhD student, so she's doing postgraduate research with biology. She's really highlighted the critical thinking skills and the scientific writing skills that she developed through the tutorial system that we offer. And additionally, the ability to think and work independently is something that she really valued from doing our course. So secondly, this is Megan, who's a communications manager. And she's highlighted that she can understand complex scientific concepts following the degree that she's done, and she's able to translate them to a public audience. So getting that practice of digesting complex information, being able to communicate that clearly. Nextly, we've got Abigail, who works as a conservation NGO. And she's again highlighted the critical and logical thinking, which is really key in her job, but also the statistics training that we've offered is something that she uses every day. Just to give two more examples that are slightly more outside of biology. So Ali, who's training to be a solicitor, said something really interesting in terms of a lot of lawyers don't necessarily have a science background. And in fact, we saw this again with people that work in finance and business as well. Having that science background was really a benefit to them in their job. So being able to approach problems differently to other lawyers and clients really valuing that their scientific background enables them to get around these technical concepts, which makes them really useful to employers. And our last example here is Emma, who works making documentaries for a media company. She's really highlighted the communication skills she's developed, so written and verbal, both through the course that we offer, but especially the tutorial system as well. So every week you're going to be arguing. And this ability to make persuasive cases based on evidence, which is really honed during our tutorial teaching, is something that she uses all the time with her media work. So just to bring this together, there's diverse options available to you with the MBiol course. That's because we develop your knowledge, of course, in broad biological topics. So this is a foundation for any career you might want to go on to that involves biology. But also, you're developing these transferable skills. So particularly observational, intellectual communication. These are indispensable for many careers and are really valued by employers. But also, it's worth highlighting that there is something very special about Oxford as well for having these transferable skills because of this tutorial system that we offer. So developing your independent work, your ability to think critically and problem solve is something that our students really benefit from. And just to finish off, that we're also very lucky at Oxford to have an excellent careers service. So not only students that are on course, but also alumni benefit from tailored career support and access to internship opportunities as well.